company headlines. And today, for this special Women's Day, I have a very special friend and guest, Anastasia, who is a serial entrepreneur, a serial mom, and a serial do-gooder in the world. And I am so excited to welcome Anastasia to the show.
Thank you so much, Vlada. I'm really happy to be here, especially on such a special day.
Fantastic. Well, Anastasia, I wanted to just ask you. Your story is remarkable. You started many more businesses than one could count, pretty much on one hand. So tell us your story in a nutshell.
Not all successful. Not all
Well, I wanted
successful.
to talk about that because when you see four exits, you know there is more to this story.
Definitely. Absolutely, definitely. Um, so, do you want me to start with my story?
Yes,
Uh,
exactly.
Basically, I grew up in Moscow in Russia, and then I left it to go to NYU Law School, and I finished it. I practiced law, actually M&A law, in the firm called Skadden Arps in New York for 5 years, and that was great in many ways. And I look back with a lot of gratitude because it was an extreme challenge. Like 20-hour long days and no weekends and canceled holidays. But in those 5 years, I learned as much as some people do in 15 years probably. And then I was kind of extremely lucky because my husband at the time started a tech company, and he was a nuclear scientist with excellent understanding of tech. I had no understanding of tech whatsoever, but we both decided that it could be helpful if I actually left my law firm and joined him in that startup. We ended up um, trying to get some VC financing. Actually was quite successful in the sense that at that time there was a lot of interest for us, but we ended up walking away from VC financing. We ended up selling the company bootstrapped. But before we sold that one, actually the company became independent enough and big enough for both of us to start our separate different startups. And my then husband focused on his new company. I focused on another business, which was very different. We can talk about it later. So when we sold the first company, we both already were focusing on two other companies. And we ended up, at the time we lived in New York. We ended up living in New York. We traveled a lot, as people do after an exit, quite a lot, quite often. And we ended up in the UK, in London, thinking that we'll just, try living in Europe for a couple of years, see how it feels. And here I am, like 12 years later, still in Europe. I started two more companies, completely different ones in London. Um, that was a lot of fun, and it was a very interesting kind of cultural challenge because England turned out to be quite a bit different from the UK as an environment for startups at the time. And I sold those ones too for very different reasons than the first two, because actually what happened is that my motivation changed completely. What nobody told me is that when you sell a company, it takes a little bit of time for you to kind of change yourself. And I changed my priorities, changed my motivations, changed. And the last two companies, the main motivation for selling for me was actually to take a break and stop working all the time and focus on my family and on sort of understanding the new stage of my life. So that's the brief story.
That's amazing. Well, it's hard enough to get one exit, right? But I think you sold four companies, right? As far as I could count.
Yeah, again, very different exits, very different reasons for them, but yes.
And Anastasia, from the kind of the massive shift and change, right? I know you had a nine-figure exit at was it the second company that you built
No,
independently,
actually,
or
that was the first one.
the
That was
first
the
one?
first one. That was the first one. And that one was the most life changing as the first one, but also it was very shocking for both my then husband and I, because we both came from sort of the former Soviet Union background. We were completely unprepared for a very different financial circumstances, and we handled that shock in very, very different ways, and it actually drove us apart. I guess, big challenges like that in life, they tend to test relationships, and unfortunately ours did not quite survive. And I've done a lot of thinking since then, why and how, and I met so many people, I'm sure, as you do, as you did, who sold businesses and then their families suffered greatly from their experience, and that's exactly what
Right.
happened to us. So my last two companies I already started after we divorced. Now I'm remarried, and it's
Yes.
all good.
No.
But and very good friends with my ex husband as well. So now it's a very good moment. But for a while it was quite tough.
Yes. That's a very complicated subject, and but I think one
Probably appropriate for a Women's Day.
for appropriate for a women's day. Exactly, exactly. Well, yeah, I don't know, do you find, and I know you're so focused on sort of post exit discovery, right, and sort of how and excited for you to share more, but I'm wondering if you're finding that women and men react to that life changing event differently, or is it more about upbringing than gender, or what have you learned so far?
Uh, Vlada, you are a very, very rare gem, in the sense that you are a woman who exited a business. And
Right.
you know very well that there are so few of us. So I
Mhm.
literally have no
No
um,
data points.
no data points, and I'm very, very curious. I'm actually very actively looking for female exited founders for my own podcast, and also for my own understanding. So I'm definitely not in a position to compare how women and men react. I know in my own family we reacted completely differently, but also at that time we had little kids who were, like 1 and 3. So I naturally was in a very motherly mood, and I think for my husband it was very different the way he processed things, and that was definitely part of the problem.
Yeah.
But how common it is, I wouldn't dare to generalize.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, it is interesting, and I meet a lot of women, and I don't know if, well, I've been actually, this week was a special week for me on my CEO Unboxed podcast, because I specifically went out to search for women who build businesses, who exited businesses. It was not easy. So girls, we need more of you, and hopefully conversations with like the one with Anastasia today, who went through this, inspires you to have it all, have kids, if that's what you want to do, and build businesses and not put limits on yourself.
Oh, absolutely. But I definitely wouldn't say that it's easy. It's definitely
No.
not easy. And I'm still figuring out how to combine children and business. It's hard and very,
Yeah.
very, very personal. We all find our own balance
Yeah.
based on our values and circumstances.
Yeah. And Sophie, just maybe start there. And I love how our conversation is very free flowing here. But if we start there, so when you were in the crunch, right? Building businesses, especially in those early days, right? It requires you to go all in. There is
Hmm.
no shortcut to this, right? You have to work
Hmm.
extra hours. You have to do five different jobs, right? Um, how did you manage this? Did you burn out? Did What kind of mindset did you have that allowed you to persevere?
Well, very poorly. I I have to say. At that time, definitely very poorly. I still have a lot to learn and improve on, but at that time, really, really poorly. And burnout for me was like a constant problem. And I would go from, overworking to basically not being able to work at all. And um, it's tough. There is a lot of guilt and responsibility that comes with having children, and just
Right.
lots of emotions and the desire to slow down with them. And that conflicts with the speed at which you want your business to move. So what I found is that switching between these two completely different speeds is particularly hard. And then you end up, stressing your kids with moving too much as a mother, or you slow down too much of the business. So for me personally, that was a big challenge. Also, I think in business, we have to use quite a lot of pushing and aggression, maybe through the male side of our nature,
Right.
and then switching back to your very female, like the very female essence that you have to have as a mother, is also another challenge. So for me, it took a lot of going back and forth and a lot of time to find a balance. I think I'm sort of there now. I feel very confident about how to do that switch, but it took years uh, to master.
Yeah. A- And do you find that sort of you had to adjust your personality sort of as you get home with your kids? Sort of the challenge was, I mean, obviously, time is always the big, big
Yeah,
challenge, and just having enough energy for it all. But that aside,
yeah.
did you find sort of the
That
switching of
aside, a small detail.
yeah, small detail aside, but did you find that switching the mindset was challenging? Like that's what I find actually for I would say for the probably the last 3 4 years I decided that I'm not going to work on weekends no matter what's
Hmm.
happening, even if the whole thing is on
Hmm.
fire. I'm going to close my laptop on Friday and I'm going to open it on Monday. And I think that's what
Hmm.
kept me in business and kept me sane, because of that ability to disconnect. But during the week I
Yeah.
can't disconnect, right? That's kind of what I find. But at least I said my daughter gets me sane and fully engaged, those 2 days a week,
Yeah.
and so I'm able to do
Yeah.
that.
I I agree with you generally. For me, it's also easier to just have a whole day when I don't do anything, as opposed to half a day I focus on this, half a day I focus on this. This exactly the same conclusion. It's not always weekends for me. It can be other days, but it's
Right.
also this very similar with different types of activities. Like I also came to the conclusion that I need to have creative days, and I just need to let it, creativity flow very naturally within those 24 hours. And then it has to be a separate day when it's all about productivity, ticking boxes, doing to do lists. Um, some people are excellent at switching between these two, and I'm definitely not.
Yeah.
I guess like you, I found my sort of way that works.
Yes,
But
exactly.
you're
Well,
very familiar, Vlada, with this problem too, with combining motherhood and entrepreneurship. It's
yeah.
super tricky.
Yes, it is super tricky, but it's so worth it. But I think what is important is I have some friends who don't have kids, and it's of course a personal choice whether you want them or not. But I think what I found is uh, when when too much of your identity gets wrapped in the company and then you sell that company, you're
Hmm.
effectively selling your child. When you have actual other important people in your life, that, at least to me, I think that's why I felt my separation wasn't as challenging, because I had so much
Hmm.
other meaning
Hmm. Yeah.
beyond the company.
I once had a fantastic conversation with Stella McCartney. It
Mhm.
was very soon after I moved to London. And I was lucky because she was a mother in the same class as my little son. And at some point, I was just so overwhelmed, having moved to a new country, building two new businesses. And I ended up venting in front of her, telling her how difficult it is. And she was amazing. Not only she listened to me, But then she said one thing. She said, listen, I have a policy. I only ever hire mothers, because once you've managed to uh, m- once you've learned to manage yourself through motherhood and work and balance and all of it, you're just so much better than anybody who hasn't had this experience. And that had enormous effect on me. Like, it was such a it was the right thing to hear at the right time. And I thought, you know what, actually it's a good thing. Maybe it's my superpower that I need to work on,
Right,
instead of
right,
complaining to a
right.
stranger
Yes, exactly.
and
I'm
in
overworked, but
front of
I'm
the
so
store.
organized and
Yeah.
I'm ready to tackle the
No,
world.
but I think sometimes talking about mindset, because you asked me before about mindsets, and I think she gave me that amazing mindset that it's actually a great thing. And I kept going back to that moment many times in my life when I felt sorry for myself, thinking, oh my God, I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do another thing. And then I remembered that wise advice, and I thought, great, I'll come out so much better once I've dealt with that challenge, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so that
Yeah. I did want to go back to business side of things, even though it's all one life, right? There is no business in life. It's all together.
uh-huh,
But going back, and so one of the questions that I often hear from founders is, they're building something, it sort of works, but not really. They don't know whether they should abandon the ship or should continue
mhm,
persevering, because everyone says push, 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 go, go, go. Eventually, if you keep
mhm.
hitting one point, right, it's going to break, right? Sort of what, having built for companies and perhaps not built maybe 10, I don't know how many, but I would want to hear more kind of the underneath that decision making, and sort of how do you look for these signals and how did you approach it?
Okay, so I definitely stopped working on some of the companies I started quite a few times, and sometimes I think back, oh, maybe I should have just persevered. And I have this tendency, unfortunately, to be very nasty on myself. So I like thinking, oh, I should have done it, and it was a great idea. But generally, um, I I'm a huge believer in a product market fit. And with my second company, I experienced that miracle when there was so much luck that product market fit happened right away. So once I've seen what it really is, not theoretically, but how it feels, that was my test for everything else. So what happened in that second company is that we came up with a new methodology to connect phone calls, and it was a combination of PSTN and VoIP, and we had no idea if it would work or not. We just realized that it's kind of really cool and it could save a lot of money to customers. And we created the world's ugliest website. We put it out there. We did zero marketing, like zero marketing. And then about 2 weeks later, suddenly all these different people started buying our product. And we had no idea why. We had no analytics built, we had absolutely nothing. And by the end of that year, we had 15 million in revenue. We still had no idea who these people were, because actually figuring it out was a whole different business. We were so busy just servicing them because the demand was so huge. We spent zero on marketing, and people just wanted it, and they were telling each other about it. And then turned out that we were also very lucky, because it was the Indian community that found us, and the Indian communities are particularly well known for spreading the word once they find something. So once I've experienced that myself, I would not settle for anything less than that. I wanted that again, even though I realized the huge part of it was luck, but I thought I'd rather not get stuck working with their own product for too long, because I know it is possible to have that. And then, for example, with my third company, it was a marketplace for visual creators, where they could present their samples of their work. And then on the other side of the marketplace was media companies hiring them to do work. So that was very interesting experience because on one side of the marketplace, I had this amazing product market fit. My visual artists were coming to my marketplace at a crazy rate. So it was exactly as in the second company. But the media side of the marketplace was extremely hard because most of the media buying people were not yet ready for that concept that I offered, and they were not ready for using marketplaces like this. And that was an interesting moment for me because I was thinking, how would I balance that? I have this amazing discovery. I created a product which one side of the marketplace likes, but what do I do with this other side? And I came to the conclusion that because one is sort of uh, B2C and one is B2B, I can't expect the same type of product market fit. It works a bit differently um, in a B2B environment. But it is about the product market fit for me personally.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really my favorite topic. And of course, this product market fit. And I think some people also have a lot of confusion. They talk about sort of product market fit. For me, it's ability to, for someone to really experience that magical value, as you said, that they really wanted that product and then they purchased it, they experienced value, and then,
Mhm.
referral whole cycle continued. Sometimes I think what's lacking might be messaging fit, right? Meaning that you are
Mhm.
just not great at articulating that value proposition, especially for some, software products, maybe not as evident as something physical, right? What exactly is the problem you're solving, right? But
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that you don't have product market fit, but it means that your messaging sucks and you need to figure out how to
yeah.
tune that.
No, no, you're absolutely right. You cannot decide that there is no product market fit until you're quite sure that you delivered the message of what it is you're offering clearly enough. I
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you.
And essentially, I'm curious. So you said it was sort of lack timing on the second problem, but how did you actually come across that problem in the first place and sort of decided that, because as an exited founder it is so hard to decide, right? You have all roads open, like what what you want to do.
Yeah. Um, it was basically a classic situation when I needed to solve my problem. And I couldn't find the right solution. There are lots of solutions now, but at that time, they didn't exist. And not being, not being a technical person, I could only articulate what it is I would like that product to be. So I had other people on the team who were much better with technical side of things, and they were the ones who actually invented the way of doing it. Um, but it was just my problem. Well, for example, with the next business, I'm not a visual artist and I'm not a media company. So the logic was very different. I just realized that the way, um, like, I spent quite a lot of time looking for visual artists myself for my previous business and actually businesses that I never pursued, but I wanted them to be very beautiful. And I realized that it was very hard at the time to find um, someone like I had an idea what kind of style, what product I wanted. But finding someone just based on their LinkedIn profile or based on the description of who they are was not helpful. So what was different with that business is that people, visual artists, instead of talking about who they were like on LinkedIn, they would just show samples of their work, and you could actually do a visual search for the type of style you were looking for. So again, I guess it was also my problem in the sense that I wanted an easier way to find visual artists, but I realized that the much better business model would be if I connected media companies that buy those services often with the right visual artists.
Hi.
I think I lost you for a bit.
Yes,
Not
I
sure
know, I
when we got
know.
disconnected.
Yes, I apologize about that. All right, we're back, and we are hopefully still live streaming, and you guys can see us. And I I'm curious about the businesses you mentioned briefly that there were some businesses that you didn't keep going with
Yes.
and you didn't persevere and sort of regretted it. Uh,
Mhm.
why did you regret? So tell me more about sort of that process and maybe a
So one
specific
particular
example.
business, yeah, one particular business, I keep going back to thinking that maybe I should have pursued it. Was kind of an information site for health tech, which would also potentially be a marketplace or of some sort for health tech products. And that one I started because I got so fascinated by health tech, and I could see that it's a huge wave that was just starting. I wanted to be part of it. I was already at the stage post exit when um, I was looking for purpose, and I thought, oh, maybe something in health. If I could only create a place where people could, you know, buy these beautiful, inexpensive products, which would help them get access to the latest and greatest in tech at home, I could I could have a great impact. And then I did end up giving up on that for business reasons, but I never stopped loving the idea. I never got this passion out of my heart. Like I thought, oh, I could have created that and actually have made this impact. And of course, what happened um, since then was exactly what I expected to happen, which is these health products becoming better and better very, very fast, cheaper and cheaper very fast, more and more accessible very fast. But I still don't see the kind of place where anybody could come and have them all, clearly compared, described, um, and also these products need to be filtered. That's another thing I wanted to achieve. I didn't want anybody uh, selling snake oil on my site, and I wanted to figure out some way for me to be able to show to customers which ones are worth uh, buying and were actually real. So every time I see more and more momentum in that, I keep thinking, oh, but I actually knew it would be happening. I could be part of it, and I'm not. That's my regret. At the same time, we only have 24 hours a day. I am doing something right now which is very much aligned with my purpose. I'm very happy about it. I understand that I couldn't clone myself and um, do both things probably with enough commitment and passion while having three kids.
Yes, exactly, exactly. At least there gotta be time, and I do subscribe to this notion of 18 summers, and I think that perhaps as we grow up, our kids grow up as well, and we understand how limited that time is, and you want to make that time count.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about you have a podcast now. You're interviewing a lot of great exited founders. And what
Mhm.
I found, and perhaps you find that as well, when I went to the first conference meeting a lot of post exit founders, I was blown away by the depth of people. Perhaps I thought to
Mhm.
myself that these people had more time to reflect and actually get to know themselves. But
Mhm.
I, I don't know, I've never met a group as deep and articulate about their values and who they are and
Mhm.
sort of having that sort of projecting that out. Is that your experience as well?
You know, absolutely. And I have to say, I'm yet to meet a successful exeter founder who would not attribute their success to luck and other people. But it's absolutely true that to get to the tiny percentage of successful exited founders, everyone has to go through enormous personal growth. You just cannot get there otherwise, and you know it, and other people. know it. So when you talk to these people, you know that they had to have done a lot of introspection, a lot of pushing, a lot of self management. So they've grown so much personally that they've become very interesting, and that's one of the reasons why I am so enthusiastic about serving these people, because I think they're so amazing, and that's exactly what you experienced at the conference. Of course, there
Exactly.
are also, fantastic entrepreneurs who never sold businesses and who've done lots of
Right.
personal growth. That's true for sure, no question about it. But to get to the point when you exit the company, and then of course, if people exited their company a few years ago, it also means that they had the luxury of time and financial
Right.
freedom to do that introspection.
Hmm.
So during that period of time, their personal growth most likely accelerated even further. And most people go into that very different type of personal growth where they actually think, oh, but who am I really, and why am I on this planet? All these questions that you don't have the time and
Hmm.
energy to even consider when you're building a business, your first
Yeah.
business.
But I do, it's interesting you mentioned that every exited founder talks about the role of luck and, you know, whatever religion, if
Hmm.
they're religious, and other people, right, in making that a reality. And I think, to me, that was a very clear shift. I spent probably the first, number of years building a business. It's like me.
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
did that. I walked through walls. It's all me, right? And then it just flipped. And I was like, no, it was allowed to happen. And I'm happy to channel that and lift others up and, make great
Yeah.
things happen as being the kind of the channel for that, if you
Yeah,
will.
but that growth out of selfishness, out of
Right,
me, as you said it, I see in me and in many other people, it's actually a very painful process, because
right.
sometimes we have to grow through, guilt or imposter syndrome. We have to think, oh my God, I now exited this company and I got most of the financial benefit. But if I'm honest with myself, there were all these other people who helped me along the way. First of all, employees or partners, but also mentors and God knows who else. But what I definitely noticed is that some people go too far, and they learn this lesson of humility too much, and then they actually want to be in the shadows. And one of the things I'm trying to do very hard, and when I achieve, I feel a lot of satisfaction. I try to help these people get out of their shell, back to the world, and talking about what it is they're doing, because many people, after they exit their businesses, they start some kind of amazing projects and not talking about them, very impactful, very unselfish projects, giving back in the most generous way. And oftentimes they don't talk about it much because they just have too much humility.
Yeah, that's really,
Even though all of us started selfish and full of ourselves and arrogant, right? We've all been there. It's a
right.
balance.
And then maybe next time you meet them as monks somewhere, or who knows, how the journey goes.
There is this interesting concept that Professor Mearsheimer from the Chicago Business School and another professor whose name I don't remember came up with. They called it hubris humility balance. And the idea was that they noticed that the students who become the most successful, they usually have a good combination of exactly what we were talking about, and they called it hubris, this arrogance and being
Right.
full of themselves, and humility. When you have too much or too little of one of them, you either don't start a business or don't achieve enough because you don't have enough hubris, or if you don't have enough humility, then you usually also don't succeed because you need to too arrogant. And I think it happens exit life when this balance becomes a challenge again.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's it's incredible, the journey, right? And so that's why perhaps there is so much shared journey, because regardless of what the challenges were, there were a lot of
Mhm.
life changing things that we all had to persevere to get where we got. And I'm so I love watching your podcast. What is its name? How people can find you and your podcast?
So I call it exit paradox. The reason I call it exit paradox is I think it's full of paradoxes, but also uh, to get out of that quite a big challenge that we face after we sell our companies, I found the most helpful tool is a paradox. And if you can resolve such paradoxes as the paradox of success or paradox of freedom, the paradox of motivation, by resolving them for yourself, you get this new energy, this new motivation. You go to a completely different level as a person, where purpose and fulfillment become the real motivators. um, that's why I called it that way. And I interview uh, post exit founders, because I also learned my lesson of humility. Hopefully, not too not to the
Not too
extreme.
much, but not.
Because what I realized as I was going through my own post exit crisis, which was kind of which was made particularly difficult because I was also going through the divorce. I was writing a blog about my feelings, and the real reason for it was to help myself process the experience. But then I started having more and more people come to me and trying to learn from my experience, and I realized that it's actually not correct to try to teach someone just based on my experience. It would be much more honest, would be the right thing to do, to create a
Right.
platform where I could bring as many stories as I possibly can, so other people can find the most relatable, the most sort of interesting story for themselves, not necessarily my own story. And I see that happen right now, and I think it's so beautiful because I get quite a lot of feedback from the podcast, and I can see how some people really reacted to one episode and other people reacted to a completely different one, right? Because it's a relatability question. You
Yeah.
probably have a similar experience in your podcast as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that some, the main feedback is that I think everyone I invite has to be ready to talk, not the fairy tale story, but the real challenges behind sort of their personal evolution, business challenges, how they persevered. And because I think that's the only way we can learn, right? If we all we see is successful success
Mhm.
around us, then, we're
No,
not learning anything.
no. Well, I guess you can get inspired, but um, as I grew older, I realized that no success story happened without very painful failure.
Right.
And I'm much more curious about how those particular people overcame that pain that inevitably they experienced along the way, right? But
Right.
most people don't want
Absolutely.
to talk about it.
Yes, exactly.
Makes
I
you
want the real
vulnerable.
stuff. I want the real stuff, what you don't talk about. But if we go back and sort of you were just starting your first business, you decided you wanted to be entrepreneur, right? You were transitioning from corporate world. What would be your first steps? How would you decide what to work on, get some people on board, to test your idea, sort of what, in some level of detail, kind of how do you imagine that?
Well, I would actually focus on the community first, and not the community of customers, but on the community of entrepreneurs. I think it's a real shortcut, because what I came to realize, and I completely underestimated it for many years, unfortunately. But as you said, if I started again, that's what I would do. I would find as many inspiring, interesting, real people and listen to their stories. And thankfully, there are podcasts like yours today. They didn't exist at the time when I started, where you can have a conversation with someone without actually knowing them. Um, and that's extremely important because one thing I appreciate now and I underestimated before is how much we learn without realizing we're even learning from other people. Because we are tribal animals, that's in our DNA. That's how we learn by just seeing other people do stuff. Right, that's how children learn, but I think adults learn exactly the same way. We may not even realize how we pick up similar mindsets as people around us. uh, we start understanding the patterns and logic of their thinking, and that's the most important part. And then, of course, there are no known and popular ideas of what to do and what not to do. But I would say um, keep it very simple. The simpler, the better, right? Again, it's for me, it's a product market fit. That's my religion. Um, so I would just say, make sure you get that first before you do anything else, including finding a team, because you don't know what skills you need on your team until you have a product market fit.
Absolutely. And maybe last bit about sort of starting a business, and now you have experience, right? You're from Russia. You started two businesses in US, two businesses in the UK.
Hmm.
Well, obviously, you were starting UK businesses as a exit entrepreneur, so I imagine that in itself was a big difference. But did you see any differences? Were they all global businesses? Did they focus on different markets? Sort of how did your do you think physical location sort of affects this, if at all?
I think it's changing very fast, right? Because so much stuff is happening remotely. When I started my first business in the UK, and I mentioned it before, that I found the environment very different. It was very different in good and bad ways. And the good part of it was that I found that people in the UK naturally think much more long term and much more about quality. In my circle, at least in that I was used to in the US, was very much going as fast as you can, just fast, 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 right? And in the UK, I found lots of people who are as entrepreneurial, but just don't have this sense of urgency as much, but have much more focus on long term, on relationships, on depth. And maybe it has a financial reason behind it as well, because raising money for startups, especially at that time, was less common than it is in the US. So lots of people were thinking, I need to make sure my company is profitable before I grow it, right?
Right,
And that's definitely not how the tech world works in the US. Again, this I think this is changing,
right.
but at the time that was my experience, and I thought um, it's interesting.
Yeah,
It's neither
absolutely. But I think
neither better
nowadays
or worse.
everyone realizes that startups are interesting, but you really need to build a business, and even if it's not making money, the unit economics has to be rock solid, right? And so you are in a position to make money if you so choose. Of course, not every business can be
Mhm.
structured this way, right? There are some that require heavy R&D or scientific investments, etc. But for most companies, right, growth at all costs, I don't know if that's going to come back, and if at all.
It will.
It will, you think? You've
I think
seen
so.
more cycles
It
of this.
comes from greed, and
Yeah,
greed is not going anywhere.
yeah, good. Well, that is a great way to end, right? People are still people. Greed is there, and I certainly was inspired by Nastasia's journey and raw and unfiltered insights. Thank you so much for being unboxed
Thank you so
with
much,
us.
Vlad. I really enjoyed it. And happy Women's Day.
Happy Women's Day.